We have some special guests that are going to be helping us present today. A couple coordinators from California. We'll give them a more formal introduction later on. But I do kind of want to dive in here as people are logging in and let you know that, and maybe actually, does anybody want to take a quick shot here before we change the slide? What is listed as strategy number 1 in the BARR model? Anyone? Bueller? Strategy 1 is whole student focus. Whole student focus. You know, actually, back in the day, it was not that it's that important. It was strategy 5. And when we kind of reworked some things, we went, you know what? Whole student focus should actually be strategy 1, because that's really what we're trying to accomplish as we work with schools, as you guys work with your student body. How do we become more student focused? So that is really kind of our topic today. We're going to look at it both philosophically a little bit, trying to give you guys a little bit of affirmation on the work you're doing as coordinators. Some of those, you know, maybe even adding some information to your quiver, if you will. So when you get a little bit of pushback here and there, you maybe have some things to draw on. But we're also going to get very practical, and that's where our California Hemet Unified coordinators are going to step in and kind of tell us what they've done with action planning. But I do want to draw your attention to, you know, our structural components. When we look at the BARR structural components and we look at whole student, there's 4 things listed, and you see 3 of them here. So when a coach comes to a school and starts looking at how is this school doing in terms of implementing the BARR model, they're officially looking for these dynamics. And, you know, we basically score, just like we provide this for you as a self-assessment rubric to look at. You can look at yourselves and evaluate yourselves. We look at this and say, how's the school doing on a scale of 1 to 7, using this rubric you see on the right. And we're looking at those 3 components. We're looking at, you know, there's this whole idea of our teachers, are they focused on the students' overall academic needs? Is Brad Brubaker still just worried about civics and how they're doing in a civics class? Or am I also concerned about how they're doing across their school day and wanting to help that child be successful across the entire school day? Same thing with that behavioral. Am I content with the fact that they don't misbehave in my room, they don't sleep in my class, or am I willing to come alongside my colleagues, the school, maybe even work with some of my own policies to help reinforce, you know, good positive behavioral things across the school day, reinforcing that in the I times I lead and things like that. The same thing with social emotional needs. Am I paying attention to how are those students presenting across the school day? Am I seeing things in the hallway that maybe raise concern and things like that? So trying to get to that where we really are going to come around that whole child and be more attentive to that whole student needs. The 4th thing we look at, and this is maybe a little bit harder to, you know, maybe calibrate at times, but we're also looking at, does the BARR teacher, are the teachers broadening their perceptions of their role as a teacher? Are they getting into some things? I want to read something to you. Actually, I'm going to hold off on that. I'll cover that later. But as we think about the whole child, you know, are teachers demonstrating a knowledge of that student's life outside of school? I kind of go back to this thing. I always use this adage that, you know, we're not making Ford pickups. You know, this is basically, if you wanted to come up with another comparison, this is more akin to custom furniture. You know, and the person that has requested that piece of furniture has some special detail needs that they want built into it. And that really is, we don't have the luxury of an assembly line process when we're working with children. If we think we do, the product may come out looking a little wonky because it's just not the way we operate. Similar to, you know, a doctor's world, a psychologist's world, we are in a people profession. So we'll get into that a little bit more after our first breakout, but I wanted to just introduce a little bit because we're going to do something a little different than what we've done in previous PLCs. We typically go to a breakout here just to kind of get a quick get to know you kind of a deal. And we're going to ask for both breakouts to be just a little bit more, I guess, substantive this time. And right off the bat, I'm going to role model this in a second here. We're going to ask you to do 2 rounds of 90 seconds each. There'll be 3 or 4 other people in your breakout room. and do 2 rounds of about 90 seconds each. The first one can kind of be an overview of you, your school. So I might start like this. If I'm Brad Brubaker. I spent 34 years as a secondary social studies teacher. 19 of those years was on a BARR team at St. Louis Park High School. I was also the girls soccer coach, girls track and field coach. We typically had a freshman class around 350 to 400 students. We had 4 ninth grade teams. And on a ninth grade team of about 100 students, give or take a few, I would be responsible each week for monitoring about 30 to 35 of those students, depending on our team size that year. So that would be kind of the first round of 90 seconds, as Brad just kind of sharing a little bit about my context. The second round of 90 seconds, where do you believe, when we start getting into where are you good, where do you think the staff that you're working with reveal a focus on the whole student, and where do you believe the staff still need to grow? So if I think back into my last year on a BARR team, again, St. Louis Park have been doing BARR for a really long time, but one of the things I was really proud of was our evolution as a staff of really listening to our students, not just assuming that we always knew exactly where they're coming from, and also creating situations to listen to our students. And that's a little teaser for what Amber and Suze are going to share in a little bit here. But taking that time to sit down and really listen to the students. And, I'll come back with a little bit of a challenge around that in a bit, but that's an area where I felt like we grew. An area where I felt like we needed to grow more was we tended to be a little inflexible with our time. I always felt like we could have done more, even within our own maybe cohort teams. We could have done more to flex our time a little bit and give each other opportunities to do even more listening, to do even more maybe small group or one-on-one time with students, so we could figure out how to work together collaboratively even better as staff. So that's kind of my little share out modeling. I'm going to encourage you to do the same in the first breakout. Again, we're giving you a little bit longer this time than normal, about double the time. We usually go about 6 minutes. We're going to give you more around that 12-minute mark to do this first round. And actually, again, you're going to do 2 rounds of share out. That first 90 seconds, basically sharing about yourself, your school context. And then the second would be an area you're good at and an area where you feel like you can grow. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was good time in your breakout. And we're going to get another chance to go back to breakouts, just so you know, but I'm going to share just a little bit more. I'm going to pass the baton to Suzanne Arnold and Amber Bohawk out in California to share some things. And then we're going to go into a second breakout. And I just want to give you a little heads up. In the second breakout, we're going to ask you to share about strategies you use or would like to implement or trying to work on implementing to be even better around whole student focus. So just kind of give you a little time to think about that as you listen to the next 15 minutes or so. I know, again, these next couple of slides are going to feel a little bit like preaching to the choir, but I think sometimes, particularly this time of year, I used to teach in geography about the doldrums in the ocean and how things wouldn't move. And sometimes this time of year can feel like the doldrums. You kind of get in that late February, March funk before spring breaks and things. And even staff gets in that once in a while too. And you start getting a little more pushback. The honeymoon of the year is definitely over. We really do have some great foundation to stand on. And I keep going back to that when people start to push back and say, hey, I don't know what, this is a lot of work. I kind of go back to, no, this is the work. It is the work we're doing. And this whole idea of how do we really get to academic outcomes that we're proud of and that we feel like we can really, just wave a banner about. Through our research, AIR was the leader in that research for us in so many different areas, going into the schools that were doing random control trials. And what did they find out? They found out that the real change in academics started back on the left side with a change in teacher attitudes, where we provided a system and a structure. And Amber and Suze are going to share about that a little bit, creating a system or a structure where teachers could do things differently, where they could perceive school and as more supportive, where they could feel like they were having greater efficacy in their daily work. Their behavior started to change because of that, because you put somebody in a situation where that they feel good about, and suddenly they're not just doing it, they actually believe it, and they're starting to pay attention to things about their students. Students feel that, their attitudes start to change. It leads to their behavior changing, and then through that process, we get to the right side of this continuum here. We get academic outcomes that we can brag about, speak about, and that our public wants us to be able to wave a banner about. So there really is some solid foundation there. More and more, we're also learning that, particularly because of COVID, there's more and more research being done on what a school needs to be for students. And this whole idea, kind of back to my factory model, that really isn't an effective way to approach students. And it kind of breaks down, if we think about this, I read an article by Mark Smiley recently, and I really liked the way he kind of broke it into these 4 areas. And he started off in a really powerful way by saying that there's an intrinsic good about caring for people when we're in a service industry like we are, when we're in a service profession, a people profession that is making custom furniture, not assembly line, automobiles. That there's something intrinsically important about that. And it also models for students that caring, that relationship building is of value. In the research that's done, they're finding that relationship building and that caring is also proving to be critical to student success. And not only that, but that the alternatives are unacceptable, because if we're not doing that, it's actually reinforcing a lot of negative things in students, to be more of that kind of looking out for number one mentality, which I think most of us, because we're in this profession, we just don't think that's the best way. We value living in community. We understand the focus around collaboration and working with other people to reach some good collaborative outcomes. And that it's really important for us, I think, in our profession to remember too that the caring shouldn't be assumed. I think there's some people, and I know there may have been times when I was in the classroom where I felt like I was being super caring and super student focused. Not sure I always was. And I think I definitely knew, I tell people all the time, I think I was pretty good working by myself, but I know I was better working in collaboration with other adults, where they could give me that other perspective and that other idea, or even help me in terms of how I should work with that student one-on-one when it came my turn to be able to work with that student one-on-one. I find that there's a fracture point in our system sometimes. As I go out observing schools, I'm noticing that there's a common breakdown. Sometimes we come together and we talk about the student, but we miss a critical step, and that's taking the message about the student, taking it to the student. And now both listening and working with that student to figure out how we're going to make improvement. So that's my introduction to Suzanne Arnold, who is the coordinator at Hemet High School, and Amber Bullhawk, who's the coordinator at West Valley High School. They're both in the same district. They actually have 2 other high schools that are also BARR high schools in their district, but they represent 2 of those schools, and they're going to talk about what they do with action planning and how they've built that into their system. Amber and Suze, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about one strategy that we use fairly often. It's called action plans. And this has been, we've been doing this for like 11 or 12 years at Hemet, and then West Valley came on in the second round of grant. And so just, in our meetings with students, we were just coming up with different ways to kind of keep track of that information. So on this next slide, you'll kind of see our, how we do this. So we do individual action plans with students. So every couple weeks, each teacher brings in 2 or 3 kids from their advisory group. And then we just have they have a little quick, 10-minute or so meeting with that student. And we just talk about interventions with them. We focus on a couple of classes that they need to improve on. And then we're able to take that action plan and link it into our spreadsheet so that the teachers can be able to check back in, so they remember when they're filling out their spreadsheets, like, oh yeah, I just had an action plan with this kid. I need to check in, see how they did. So that's kind of how we go about using our action plans. And the way we're doing it currently, as you can see on the next slide, this was our original form. And this is even probably the third or fourth generation of that form, because every time we'd be like, oh, let's add this to it. And so it just kept getting more and more stuff on it. And so basically this is the form, although it looks a little different now, that we would fill out as we sit with that student. So, you know, we're asking them about their strengths and who they connect with. And we even found out that a lot of times they don't know that the one teacher is their advisor teacher. They just think everybody's their advisor. So we like to go, well, this is your actual person that's checking you. And we always, you know, ask about activities and then what they want to do after high school. And then we set goals, and then we have all their classes, and we can look at their current grades and their grade goals. And then we had a spot for them to write in goals of what they could do to help improve in that class. The pros of doing it this way, because we would meet with 2 kids each week from the block, and it could be whatever 2 we felt were the highest need that week. And so kind of the pros of this idea here was we had really in-depth meetings with those 1 or 2 students, and then and they heard from the whole entire team. So all 3 teachers were there, the coordinator was there, the counselor was there, sometimes the MFT was there, sometimes their parent was there. So it could really delve into a really big meeting, which that could have been a con. So for some kids, that was a little bit overwhelming to have all of us in the room. So that could go either way depending on the student. The other thing that kind of started to be a little, passing period. The other thing that was kind of hard is, sorry, now we're having a tardy suite. So you get to hear music behind me. So the other thing about this is we were focusing on all 6 classes, and that got a little overwhelming because for some kids, especially if they had Fs in all 6 classes, we were trying to set a goal everywhere, and that got a little overwhelming. And then at first we just had this one piece of paper, and we'd have to make a copy of it. And then we got super fancy and made the little triplicate form. And then, so that was great, but still not everybody on the team had access to the action plan. So that's how we kept doing our little PDSA cycles before we knew what a PDSA cycle was, of always trying to up this form. And so then we've moved on from there.
So I'm Amber Bohack, and I am the coordinator at West Valley High School in Hemet, and this is my 9th year as coordinator. I was a freshman English teacher 9 years prior to that. So like Suzanne said, we are every single year, if not semester, adapting this action plan. In fact, we just made changes to it like last semester, always trying to make it better. So this is the newest rendition of our action plan, and I did see a question in the chat about, can we have this? Absolutely. At the end of this presentation, you'll get our emails. Just email us and we'll be happy to send you a link to it. So now it has evolved from a piece of paper to a Google Sheet. So we're getting fancy. And there are 3 different slides that will show the entire action plan. So this is the first third of the action plan right here. So again, we haven't changed the core of it. We're still asking students what their strengths are. You know, what are they interested in doing at our school? So we list all of our clubs and activities, sports in that box that you can see there. And then again, what are your goals after high school? I want to say real quick that teachers crave this time with students. When they're teaching their subject matter, they don't have the time to have an in-depth conversation with their advisees. And so this action planning time has really allowed them to have that in-depth conversation. And it's one of my favorite things to observe, because you'll see teachers who just come out of their shell when they're one-on-one with a student, and they are charismatic and they're encouraging and they're motivating, and it's so awesome to see how they interact with the students one-on-one. Our newest addition to this form, you'll see, is the first follow-up and second follow-up. Actually, go back, Ellie, for a second. Thank you. So we actually added these two columns as like a reminder to, okay, you met with the student once, but did that do anything later on? So we also have these follow-ups that we've now added into the Google Sheet as well. Go ahead, Ellie. We also realized on that first one that Suzanne was going over, we were going over all 6 classes with the student, and we realized that for a student who may have 4, 5, or 6 Fs, that can be extremely overwhelming. And so we decided to focus on just 2 classes during our action plan time, so that the student didn't feel overwhelmed, number 1, but number 2, we could really dive deep into those 2 classes. And so you'll see here, there is a spot for each class, and we really do include the student. We don't just fill it out ourselves. We ask the student, why do you have an F in biology? And so we go over these different possible reasons that they may have that grade. And then what can they do to improve that grade? And again, all of these are just boxes that the teacher or the advisor can check using their mouse. And it really empowers the student to feel like they are now taking some ownership in their own education. You'll see down there's also a place for the goal. We ask the BARR advisors to make sure that they're doing a SMART goal. So, I'm going to turn in my English comparative contrast essay by this Friday, something very specific. And there's also a spot for notes that maybe we learned something about the student that maybe, they just lost a grandparent a few weeks ago, or they're homeless, or whatever we may learn. There's also a spot for us to include any notes about the student under each of the goals as well. And it's important here to kind of differentiate between a teacher goal and a student goal. Teacher goals are kind of things that we do in our block meetings. I'm going to call home, I'm going to, give a makeup day or whatever. But a student goal is really putting the onus on the student. What is the student now required to do to improve this grade in that class? And they are all going to get a copy of this when they're finished. We send electronically a copy of this to the student, their guardian, and the BARR advisor. So everyone has this at their disposal as well. And then the next slide, Suzanne had a great idea to add these 3 questions at the end. What's going well for you? What challenges are you facing? And how can we help to engage you and be successful in school? And again, BARR is all about getting information about the whole student, not just their academics, attendance. And so again, this is a great way to get more information about the whole student to help us as we move forward with this student. So where do we put this when we're done? If you go to the next slide, Ali. So this is our Google Excel sheet that we use to house all of our data. So each BARR team has access to the sheet with all of their advisees on it. And so you'll see where that first yellow arrow is in the top right there, is that we actually link the action plan into the spreadsheet so that we, number 1, remember that we did it because we have a lot of freshmen. And number 2, it's accessible to anyone who has access to this sheet. So all the other teachers in that same block, the counselor, myself, we can all access the action plan very easily. And then just a kind of a little tidbit that, again, 9 years, that, every year you're evolving. We used to email teachers what they were supposed to do after a block meeting. We used to, hey, write it down during the block meeting. Now we just use the comment function in Sheets. So I actually have a note taker in every single block meeting who is taking notes and then assigning people tasks using that comment section. If you've never used it, it's fantastic, because what it does is it sends that person an email with their task. And then on that email, they can actually click, resolved, or they can actually respond and say, I called this parent and this is what they said, or whatever it happens to be. I talked to this PE teacher and this is what they said to me. So you have a great way to kind of stay in communication, even when you're not in a block meeting. It's also a great way to keep everyone accountable as well, including me, because I get my own tasks throughout the meetings too. So that's kind of how we, where we put it. So everything is in one spot versus, 4,000 different folders. The next slide for Suzanne, I think. Suzanne,
you're muted.
Muted.
There we go. All right, sorry about that. We had the party sweep going on, so I had music. There's all kinds of craziness happening here. So one of the ways that, another way that I kind of house all the action plans so that they're together. So in my, in my drive on Google, I have under the year of the whatever bar it is, I have action plans for an action plan folder for every single block. So then I have the original document here, and then in our meeting when we decide, okay, next week is action plans, I get the names of the students. So then I just make a copy and we change the title of the copy to the student's name. And then so they'll all be right here. So in the meeting, the teachers, they have a link to this action plan folder. So then they'll fill out the action plan. And then once they're all done, after we've linked them to the spreadsheets, then we put, then I'll drag them at the end of the week to either the completed file, or if we have a no-show. So then that way we can go back and look, oh yes, we've done one on this kid, or I can see, well, this is who we tried to have and they didn't come. So a lot of times the counselor or myself will go into this file and grab these kids and pull them in and kind of do a mini action plan with them if their grades are still not where they need to be. So that's just one little way that kind of makes it easier to keep track of all of them. And then there's, for each block, they have their own copy. So I think that's it for that slide.
Okay, and I will put it in the chat. I'm just not very good at multitasking, so it'll get there, I promise. All right, so kind of our learning over the past, 10, 12, 13 years we've been doing BARR is that, again, having everything together is very important. At one point we had, 10 different folders per block, and the poor teachers, who are also, by the way, teaching classes, had no idea where to look for anything. So it made sense to us, but not to them. So we really tried to make it more, universal, so everything's kind of in one spot. And I can't remember how long it was ago that BARR Center created that amazing Google Sheet. I think it was like 2 years ago, that has where all the data goes. It's been a life changer. And so that's been really a great place to put everything. Another kind of just a tip that we've learned over the years is, teachers are supposed to gather data on their advisees weekly. That's the BARR model. Sometimes they get busy, or like maybe a triad's ending and they're trying to do makeup days, and things are happening. So we try to really do a lot of DF lists that we provide for our teachers. So we as a coordinator will actually run the data, and then we'll provide them with a live DF list so that they can access it and kind of see in a snapshot, who in their block currently has a D or an F, and then which classes it is they're failing. This is also a great tool to use to find which kids you're going to do action plans with, because maybe you have a kid who has a 58%, they're really, really close to passing. Well, that kid can easily move over to a passing grade. So it's another great tool to use to kind of get your candidates for action plans and who you're going to have conversations with. And we do these all the time at the end of a grading period. And then sometimes we'll just kind of do it throughout the school year as well when we feel like it's needed.
Well, to kind of piggyback on that a little bit too, on the actual data sheet, I have a tab that's a live DF list. So I put it in there. So then again, housing all that information in one spot makes it easy for teachers to just, they open up their data sheet and everything's there and everything's on it. With the action plans, now that we've made them, that kind of that Excel Google sheet, we always share it with the student and the guardian. We just change it to viewer for them. And then all the teachers are on it as well. So that way everybody can see it. We have an Aries system, that's our grading system, and we can do interventions. So I during the meetings, as the kids are there, I'm putting interventions into our Aries. So that way other people in the building, admin, things like that, when they're looking, if a kid comes across their radar, they can see all the stuff, all the interventions that have been done for the student. So that's because not everybody has access to the data spreadsheet, but this way people in the school know, like, oh, BARR has been pulling this kid in. They've had a lot of action plans. And so we love action plans. Like we said, we do them every other week, and it helps us get to know the students a little bit better, and just really kind of focus in on what they need. And just because we have kind of honed it into just, 2 classes, it's a lot less overwhelming. And we're able to get to more kids because each advisor brings in 2 or 3 kids. So we've seen a really good, just overall, like the teachers like talking to the kids more. And it's just, instead of us always talking about the kids, as Brad said, we're actually we're taking it to the kids. So they're getting to, make goals for themselves and see like, oh, there's a lot of adults in the room that care about this for me. So it's a great thing.
Yeah, and there's a good question there from Jenny from St. Cloud. She's asking, and so this is in addition to your regular student reviews that you're doing, or is this the actual student review?
Well, we alternate. So one week is we call it our data meeting, where all of us they're bringing their 5 kids that they want to talk about, and we're having the adult meeting. And then another week, and then the opposite week, we're doing the action plans where the kids are coming in. So
what I witnessed, Jenny, is there, the teachers are actually coming in and telling Susan and Amber who they want to do action planning with. Like, I feel like I'm monitoring my list of students. Here's who I want to plan with next week. So it's much more, I would say it's much more classified on the intervention side, but I love it because it kind of avoids that fracture point of not taking it to the student, of actually making that connection with a student. The other thing I want to highlight is that I just really appreciate too that it just role models collaborating with the kid too. Sometimes students just need to hear that they can still improve. Like, it's like I'm not buried. I can still, there's a way out, and having a teacher tell them that and work with them on that, I think sometimes is the thing that can get them over that next hump. We have time for one more question here. Asking, so do you do this as your block meetings? And I will say, so let me throw it in. They do. I will say too, we want to be really careful. We don't want you to try to jump from step A to M. Again, this is over 10 plus years of them kind of developing. And I think they have so many other things very clearly in place in terms of their systems, whether that's data collection, data entering, monitoring, that it's all really fine tuned. And now they can kind of build that into their process over time. So
and it's not in place of, we still, like Suzanne mentioned, we have our block meetings every other week. We still have that set time. But on those off weeks is the weeks that we're doing the action plans. And we try to be so Suzanne and the other coordinators and I in Hemet Unified, we sit down prior to a school year starting, and we actually map out when are our triads going to end. So when are our grading periods going to end? So when would be most beneficial to have action planning? We really try to be strategic. And again, this is a lot of years in the making, where we realize like, okay, 4th triad, our failure rate is awful. So why don't we do more action plans in 4th triad? Again, this is always continually, becoming a better process for us. But we try to be strategic about when we're doing our action plans and when our block meetings are happening and when our F lists are going out, so that we're, getting the biggest bang for our buck per se, because we want to make sure that the students are being successful. So again, observations happen every single year. You tweak it, you move on, you change things, and you become better for it.
Yeah. And
when we first started, we would do action plans like once a month. So we would have like 2 or 3 where as adults, we were doing our data. They were, tracking their kids, talking about kids. But then we just started seeing like all of our interventions were talk to student, called home. And there was never any, it didn't seem like there were interventions that were happening besides just talking. So that's when we kind of started, we need to start meeting with kids more. Because the little conversations in class that the teachers were having, about, okay, here's your grades this week, here's how you're doing, why don't you work on this? Those weren't enough. And so, when we first started, it was maybe once a month. And then we started going, oh, maybe we need to do a little more than once a month, because we were starting to see the benefit, but it was like, oh, 1 or 2 kids. And then, so that's when we finally progressed to, okay, now we feel like we've got the other stuff in place that's happening, so we can take the time to do action plans every other week. If that's not feasible for you, then try it once a month. Have an action plan meeting once a month, and let your teachers bring in 2 or 3 kids and give it a go with them.
The one thing we do want to communicate, we don't want you to be too quick to pull the plug on weekly meetings because we think there could be creative ways to fit it in addition to be quite honest. And that's, I know at St. Louis Park, what we did, we fit that in addition to. We do want to go to one last breakout. We're going to cut it to 8 minutes. Great questions, great conversation, but we're going to make sure we have a chance to just kind of wrap things up at the end too. So we're going to go to that breakout and just ask you to think about, maybe share a little bit. What are you doing in this area, but also what's one takeaway? What's something you'd like to possibly do moving forward in this area of addressing whole student more purposefully? All right, so we're going to go back to our breakout groups. Give you a chance to continue discussing.
Here we go, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amber and Sue, so much.
Really
Good
great
stuff.
Enjoy the conversation, everyone.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up in very expedited fashion. We got about 3 minutes here to cover a couple things. People have asked in the chat box about the action plan document. You can see on the left here under tools, if you go to the member portal, we're really trying to get people really accustomed to using it. There's lots of great resources there. When you download, and if you search secondary action plan and download this, it will come down as a Word document and allow you to make adjustments to fit your school. So for instance, under interventions, if you don't have Saturday school, you can replace that with something else or leave that area blank. So you can use this and make this document your own, which if you'll notice here, this looks a lot like that third version that Susan and Amber shared with you, because that's where they probably got it, was from this version. So you start working with this and making it fit what your school needs in terms of the language there. As Susan and Amber have already mentioned, they've already provided a couple things, but you can reach out to them. We'll give you their contact information. Corey Bradley's comeback plan is very similar to an action planning document. He shared that last week and shared that he was open, or last month, and shared that he was open to people reaching out to him for that information. I'd like to give a shout out. I was just in Maryland this week, and I had a chance to visit North Carolina High School. Erin Adams is their coordinator, and she actually used our last PLC video recording with her staff to talk about interventions as they're trying to build out interventions at their school. So I thought that was a really, again, being resourceful, creative with some of the resources and how to use those to get the most bang for their buck in terms of attending a PLC and looking at some of this information. I've seen schools this year use goal setting times and then turn around and collect those goal setting documents from students and roll right into an action planning one-on-one with a student based on the things they put on their goal setting sheet. So another way to kind of hit all the students. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but again, real focus is we want to be whole student focused. We want to take the plans that we make as adults to the students and their families if necessary, but making sure we're communicating and listening to them and giving them a chance to collaborate with adults, which is another great skill for them to learn. Reach out to me at any time. Amber and Suze have graciously said that you can reach out to them also. They will also be at the national conference, so you can pull them aside and pick their brain and get even more information, but we'll do our best to build in some more opportunities to learn about action planning at the national conference also. And with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us. This would not be nearly as rich without your participation. So thank you so much for coming and participating in our PLC today.